Well, it's a surprise to absolutely nobody that Ohio State is the national champion in college football. But what can Indiana learn and take away from the Buckeyes championship run to try to make one of their own?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting because right now new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, thank you so much for being here, truly making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen or your first watch every single day. Shout out to my everydayers. You know who you are, and I appreciate you. Or if you're just now checking us out for the very first time, hope you enjoy and glad that you're here. Well, the Ohio State Buckeyes are the national champions for the 24 season here in 2025. They raised the trophy last night against Notre Dame, and they won by double digits, which was no surprise to anybody. You pay the most money, you get the best players, you win championships. It's pretty simple, just like that. And yeah, I am going to push into that narrative because that's exactly what happened. And look, Notre Dame made it interesting, sure, but Ohio State was the best team in America. They had the best roster. They had the best players. They had the best build of any team in the country. And it's because their NIL evaluation was nearly $30 million. And so it's whatever. Congratulations to them. Hey, the Big Ten won back-to-back national championships. Michigan 2 years ago and Ohio State this year, right? I guess that's something to be kind of excited about, right? Indiana lost 2 games this year, and they lost them to the runner-up in college football and the national champion in college football. So all things considered, not too bad for the Hoosiers in 2024. But what can we learn? What can Curt Cignetti do and look at that run for the Buckeyes and say, how can we establish that and implement that in our program? And more importantly, how can Indiana make another run in 2025? Well, you could simply just say, spend more money and get better players. Well, yeah, duh. That's the obvious answer. And Indiana is trying to do that. And we're getting more money and we're getting more support. And we'll get somewhere near that someday. I'm not going to say we're ever going to have that kind of money to spend on a football roster. Maybe we will, and maybe we won't. I don't know. But that seems to be a pretty lofty expectation. And it also seems like that may not be the case forever. That may not be allowed forever. And that's a whole separate conversation. And whether that's going to happen or not, I still don't know. And nobody really knows. But in terms of what Ohio State did, man, it's crazy to look at, right? Ryan Day and Ohio State were the favorite to win the national championship when the year started because they had the best roster. They spent the most money. They were supposed to do it. Then they went through the season, right? They went to Oregon and they lost by 1 in Eugene. Not a bad loss. They kept doing their thing, took down Indiana, right? They kept doing their thing. And then all of a sudden, boom, they tripped up against Michigan again for the 4th time in a row. Their senior class was 0-4 against Michigan. That's not cool for them in Columbus. That's a big, big deal. And there were serious conversations about Ryan Day being fired as the coach at Ohio State. If Tennessee had gone to Columbus and beat the Buckeyes in the first round of the college football playoff, I believe they would have fired him. Instead, they had one of the best turnarounds I've ever seen midseason. They just destroyed everybody. They beat every single opponent in the playoffs by double digits, and they won the national championship. So how can Indiana learn from that? What can Indiana take away? Well, it shows that the season's never over, right? It shows that one loss doesn't define you. And I think Indiana did a really good job with that after dropping that game against Ohio State, right? And we decided, you know what? We're not going to let that define us. We turned around and played, I think, some really good football. And we went up against a team in Notre Dame that just had better players than we did. But look at 2025 as we look ahead now. Look at what we have. We've already learned from the past and moving into the future. Our roster is better this year than it was last year. At every position, maybe not. But overall, I think it is. I think this roster is better in 2025 for Indiana than it was in 2024. And you start to look around these different way too early top 25s and things like that. And it is way too early. Okay. It's the morning after the national championship game. But 24/7 Sports has us as 23, I believe. We have ESPN that's got Indiana at 17 in their way too early top 25. And of course, this is just based off of returners and transfer portal guys and things like that, which we'll get to in a second. And so if you're Indiana, you just got to keep getting better. You just got to keep growing. You've got to keep building the foundation of your program. Ryan Day took over a program at Ohio State. He took over something that was already built from Urban Meyer and just sort of continued it. And I still don't think Ryan Day's a great head coach. I think he just had a really expensive roster. And I think he just had the best team and the best group of players who just were better than everybody else. Do I think that's sustainable? I don't know. Nick Saban had comments on that. But overall, for Indiana, we're doing that just on a lesser scale and growing as we go. We have good NIL, better than it was, not Ohio State level, but better than it was. And I think we have a better head coach. I think Curt Cignetti is one of the best head coaches in college football. And Indiana believes that too. They got him an 8-year extension for a reason. He ain't going anywhere. And so I'll take what we're building right here with a really good head coach, with a roster that's getting better. The fact that you have assistant coaches being poached from other programs tells you you're doing something right. And so for Indiana, I think our roster's better. I think our NIL is getting better. Our support is getting better. Our program is growing by the day. And so you look at how Ohio State did it, that's fine. We can do something like that, maybe not to that extent, but very similar, and continue to grow and get relevant in college football and compete in an ever-growing Big Ten. Because I still think we're going into 25, I'd say we're one of the more talented rosters in the Big Ten so far. And there's a lot to learn about everybody in this conference. But just based off what we bring back, all Americans on defense, you bring in a new starting quarterback, you bring a lot in on offense as well with a running back, tight end, offensive line. Indiana is better in 25 than in 24. And so we may have had our most historic year this past year, but why can't we run it back in 2025? I think we can. I think we can exceed that. I think we can have an even better year this upcoming season because all the players that are coming back, plus the ones that are coming in. And I think after getting a year under his belt, Curt Cignetti now knows what he's doing. He's got a little more comfortable. Not that he didn't know. I mean, he had a fantastic season and he's been coaching football for a long, long time. But now we're ready to go. Now we got the feet settled in the sand, and now it's time to go to work. And I think Indiana will do that in 2025, and I can't wait to see what that holds. And 2025 is an important year. It's a very important year for Indiana with the players you have, the schedule you have, and the changing landscape of college football. We'll tell you why all of that is important when we come back right here on today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on all things Indiana athletics. Thank you so much for being here. If you are watching on the YouTube side, on the video version, if you haven't already, like this video, drop your comments down below. Can Indiana back it up in 2025? Can we make another run this season with Curt Cignetti and Indiana football? Want to hear from you in the YouTube comments, and then be sure that you have subscribed to the channel if you haven't already. We are continuing to grow on that side of things, so thank you so much much for doing that. And my audio listeners, be sure you are following over there, have those notifications turned on, leave us a 5-star review, whether you're on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, doesn't matter. Be sure you do all those things for us on the audio platforms as well. Helps us grow tremendously. So thank you so much. Well, I said 2025 is an important year. It's a very important season for Indiana football and for college football. Some of you may have saw the reports that Indiana, the athletics department, cut nearly 20 employees because of what they believe the revenue sharing coming up in college football. Means Indiana's worried about divvying out the money. They're worried about not having enough money because of revenue sharing. And that's one major concern. They're growing NIL by the day, right? I mean, you've got guys making $4, $6, $8 million a year for NIL, right? The Quinn Ewers stuff was insanity. Carson Beck confirming he's making $4 million down at Miami. Like, let's just be honest with ourselves. Indiana doesn't have that kind of money for football. Not right now. We just don't. And that's a scary thing. And it's wild because Indiana we just made the college football playoffs, and we're still worried about whether we can have enough money to afford a winning roster. Let that sink in for just a second. And we're not the only ones. There are major programs, major schools in college athletics that are concerned that they can't afford winning rosters in college athletics, football, basketball, baseball, anything, right? And man, that's not what this is supposed to be. NIL has broken college athletics, and that's not what today's show is about. But 2025 could have so many changes, or it could be the final year before all these major changes. And you've got to get your foot in the door and you've got to solidify your spot, right? Could we see more conference expansion coming up in a couple of years? Maybe. And if you're Indiana, which we have to think this way, you've got to keep winning. You don't want to be left behind. If there was a split 3 years ago, Indiana would have been left in the dust. Nobody wanted us. Nobody wanted our football program. But if you start winning games and the split that I think is coming, then maybe they'll bring you along. Maybe they'll add you. Maybe they'll give you the option to be a part of whatever new group of college football exists in the future. I think the SEC and the Big Ten will tell the NCAA to kick rocks, and I think they'll form their own super league, and you'll just start bringing teams in that you want to have a part of it. Indiana needs to be a part of that. You also have, as I mentioned, this revenue sharing idea that's crazy to think about, and you've got the school and the athletic department letting people go, firing people to save money, to divvy it out to people, to the players and the coaches and everybody involved. I mean, it's wild how much this has changed. But think about the Big Ten right now. Think about the conference of the Big Ten. You just have back-to-back national champions, and the conference is really, really good, really strong. Indiana has an important run in front of them, an important season in front of them for 2025, because I believe we are one of the more talented teams in this conference. And I also think we have one of the more favorable schedules in this conference as well. Let me read you the 2025 schedule in case you've forgotten what it looks like. Okay, we start the season with 3 cupcakes, and I'm not excited about it. I hate that we do this. I believe this is something a problem with college football too. I think we play too many of these. I do. I think playing 3 of these types of crap cupcake games are worthless. I think it's a waste of time, waste of money, waste of resources, but that's an argument for a different time as well. You play Old Dominion to start, Kennesaw State, and then Indiana State. Okay, whoop-de-doo. We don't start the season until September 20th in college football for Indiana in 2025. You host Illinois, then you go to Iowa. Then you have a bye week. Cool. Fine. Very doable, right? Very, very doable for Indiana. Coming off the bye week, we go to Oregon in Eugene on Saturday, October 11th. We come back home to take on Michigan State and UCLA before we make back-to-back road trips of Maryland and then at Penn State. Then we come home for Wisconsin. That's where it's going to get tough. You go to Maryland, to Penn State, and home for Wisconsin. Take a bye on November 22nd, and then you go to Purdue to end the season. Don't think Purdue is going to be anything, but we'll see how that turns out. So other than having to go at Maryland, at Penn State, and home versus Wisconsin, the game at Oregon is tough, but the schedule's not hard, right? The schedule's not difficult. And we just saw with the college football playoff, you can afford a couple of losses if you're in a major Power Four conference. And now that Indiana, now that we have built up a reputation, a short reputation, yes, but a reputation, and it's not a surprise if we're good in 2025 like it was in 2024, I think we can afford two losses. You can go out to Oregon to lose that game. Sure. You can go out and lose to Penn State. Sure. If you back it up with wins over Iowa and Michigan State and Wisconsin and Purdue, right? You can't lose your two biggest games and not have something else to show for it. And I think you maybe can't even lose your two biggest games if you're Indiana in 2025. Split those, right? Split the Oregon and Penn State game. Win one. And then you're good, and you'll be a college football playoff team again this upcoming season. And I've told you several times today, I think our roster is good enough to get there. I think we're plenty good enough to get back to the college football playoffs. Think about the guys that are coming back. Guys like Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper on the offensive side, playing on the outside. Think about D'Angelo Pons and Aiden Fisher. Those are your All-Americans I talked about that are coming back on the defensive side. Linebacker Aiden Fisher and corner D'Angelo Pons. What more could you ask for? How many other teams are bringing back two All-Americans on the defense in the Big Ten? I'd be willing to say it's very few. And so you have that for Indiana, plus all the transfers you just brought in, right? Plus, you've got your starting quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. You bring in two legit running backs and Beebe from UAB and Hemby from Maryland. You bring in now your hopefully starting tight end with Holden Stays from Tennessee. You bring in great secondary guys from several different places across the transfer portal. I think we have one of the best transfer portal classes coming into 2025. So I say all of that because I firmly, truly believe that we can make another run in 2025. And here's what's crazy is if you do it again, this is why it's important. If you do it again and you can consistently do it, it would no longer be considered going on a run. It wouldn't be considered a magical season, a historical season, just a wild, unexpected season from Indiana. This is what I want to be the expectation. This is what I want the fans to want, the coaches to want, the players to want, and the media to want and expect from us. Am I saying national championships every year? No. But I am saying to have legitimate seasons, 8, 9, 10 win years, and flirting / making the college football playoff every year. I think we are at a spot now with a head coach that has got everybody bought in. That should be where we start to go. Is it realistic to say that in the first 3-4 years every single time? Maybe not. But I believe it can be done. In today's era, with transfer portal, NIL, are you kidding me? It absolutely can be done. We just saw it happen. And you can do it again this season. And maybe I'm blind. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. I just think we're good enough. And I think in this era, I think we have an advantage that other schools they have, but we're able to take advantage of it more. We went from terrible to really good really fast, and we can sustain that. We can keep that up. And I don't want it to be a magical year when Indiana wins 9 or 10 games. I want that to be the expectation. And I think we can do that this season with the schedule we have, with the transfers we bring in, and the returning players. Plus, you keep almost all your coaches except Tino, of course. I think we can do it again in 2025. And maybe we could be the third Big Ten team in a row to win the college football national championship. All right, coming up in our final segment on Locked On Hoosiers, going to flip over to basketball for a minute and talk about the current Big Ten standings as another week begins in college basketball. Where are the Indiana Hoosiers? We've talked a lot of bad about them, but they're higher in the standings than you think. We'll have that for you in our final segment right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it even easier than ever to win big while enjoying all of the football action. Now that it's playoff time, There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least two players. And if your pick hits, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right. 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. For me, I'm all about the hot takes this season. This week, I'm looking at the NFC Championship game and the AFC Championship game. Maybe like a little Patrick Mahomes more than rushing touchdowns, or possibly, call me crazy here, maybe even less on Travis Kelce receiving touchdowns. Had one this past week. Are they going to give it to him again? I don't know, man. You would think you just defend their go-to guy who kind of was quiet near the end of the regular season. And of course, as soon as playoffs come around, they always find 87. So you could go more or less on Patrick Mahomes touchdowns or Travis Kelce touchdowns. You could do that on Prize Picks. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here. Reminder, this show is free to you every single day, Monday through Friday. That's right, plus bonus episodes throughout the week and on the weekends here and there. So you better have those notifications turned on so you never miss any extra episodes of Locked On Hoosiers. Want to look at the latest Big Ten basketball standings because there's a lot of ranked teams in this conference. There's a lot of good teams in this conference. And another week begins of crucial Indiana and Big Ten basketball. And I'm telling you that the Hoosiers are higher in the standings than you think. This conference has torn itself apart so far. And I can't remember if I said that or not before the season. I feel like I did, and I feel like it made sense. But call me out if I didn't, I guess. It's happening in front of our eyes. There's so many good teams. Are there great teams? I don't know. We're still trying to figure that out. But there's a lot of really good teams and a lot of solid teams in this conference. Here's the latest standings. All right, here you go. In the Big Ten, you have one team through 7, 8 games now that's undefeated in conference play. And that's Michigan State, who is quietly 7-0 and quietly a top 10 team in college basketball, according to the latest AP poll. You also have Purdue, who's 7-1, Michigan at 6-1, Wisconsin 5-2, Illinois 5-3. Oh, wait, who is that? Oh, it's Indiana at 5-3 as well. Oregon, who's a top 15 team in college basketball, they're 4-3 in Big Ten play. Maryland 4-4, and then everybody else below is under 500. UCLA, USC, Iowa, Penn State, Rutgers, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, Washington, and Minnesota. Everybody at least has a win. There are no winless teams in this conference. But look at the teams that are 500 and better. Maryland, going from bottom to top. Maryland, Oregon, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Purdue, and Michigan State. There are 2 teams 500 or better who are outside the top 25. Everybody else, that's 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 teams are 500 and better. So half the conference. And 6 of those are ranked in the top 25. Indiana, of course, is not. So overall, we're 14-5, but our 5-3 Big Ten record is not all that bad. And the fact that we're picking up quad 1 wins along the way, that's a good sign for this Indiana squad. Now, we have to keep winning games, and we've talked about the stretch that's upcoming for this Indiana team after we play our 2 games this week. We're at Northwestern. That's tomorrow night for Indiana, and then we're home against Maryland this weekend inside of Assembly Hall. Great. That's fine. You're playing 2 teams that are, one is near the bottom, right? I told you Northwestern is bottom 4 of this conference. The other one's Maryland, that team that's currently 4-4 in Big Ten play, the one that's still above 500 in the conference. So not as easy as it sounds. You do get them at home. You do get them inside Assembly Hall. But then we've talked about what's upcoming and what's coming up down the tracks for us on the Indiana side of things. Oh, goodness. I get scared every time I look at it. At Purdue, number 11 ranked team in the country. At Wisconsin, the 18th ranked team in the country. Home for Michigan, 21st ranked team in the country. at Michigan State, the 8th ranked team in the country, home for UCLA, and then home versus number 11 Purdue. Whew, man, I can't look at it all at one time. It's overwhelming because I see what's coming and I see what could happen during that stretch. And we'll talk more about that. I continue to double down on you have a chance right now with the Ohio State win, a game at Northwestern tomorrow, and Maryland over the weekend at home. You have to win these games. You have to. If you don't, you're in big trouble. And I'm talking to you, Mike Woodson. If you don't win the gimmies, and not even gimmies, they're still tough games, but the winnable games, right? The ones that aren't against top 10 teams on the road. If you can't win the ones that aren't that, then you aren't going to win those types of games. And it's almost win these two and then just survive. Get a win in there somewhere if you're Indiana in that brutal stretch. And then try to finish out the season, which isn't terrible. Penn State at home, at Washington, at Oregon's tough, and then Ohio State comes to Assembly Hall. Not bad. You can manage those last four. But that big stretch you're about to go on, man, you just got to survive, get some wins before it, get some wins after it, and call me crazy. We could still be an NCAA tournament team. But if you just go full lockdown mode and just get beat every game in there, you won't make the tournament. You'll get eliminated early in the Big Ten tournament, and Mike Woodson will no longer be your head coach. So we'll see what's coming up. Indiana plays Northwestern tomorrow. We'll talk more about that tomorrow on the show. We'll give you some preview, break it down, what it means, what could happen. Who has to step up? Who has to play well? How can you build off of the Ohio State win? We'll have that for you coming up on tomorrow's episode of Locked on Hoosiers. And that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked on Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here. I cannot say it enough how much your support, how much your attention and your fandom means to this show, and just your willingness to be here every single day really does mean a ton to me. And again, if you're listening on audio, turn those notifications on, follow us if you can, leave us those 5-star reviews, helps us a lot. And on YouTube, like the video, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay, we're back tomorrow, Hoosier fans. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.